All right. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلوات وأتم التسليم على الحبيب المصطفى وعلى آله ومن تبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. Dear wonderful brothers and sister, here we welcome you. I welcome you to this second monthly discussion forum where we are discussing ideas related to economics and the envisioning of good economics. If sometime I try to avoid the term Islamic economics and try to say we just want to go for good economics, and then and this some if I would can quickly highlight the main objective of this group. Of course, this is the Maqasid Institute that is organizing this discussion. And the Maqasid Institute, we have the Maqasid methodology that we have developed internally. And ultimately, what we like to see happen is the reconstruction of disciplines and transdisciplines from this Maqasid methodology approach. This is something that I will touch on at the end of my concluding remarks, and where I kind of, challenge myself and even Akhi Ildos and Jasmine, who I know have put a lot of effort into this, to think about what are the steps there. But the reconstruction of these disciplines is ultimately the goal, and we're doing that because we want these ulum to actually reflect the higher objective that Islam would like to achieve. And would like to quickly welcome dear Dr. Lisa, Alhamdulillah, who is very brave, and Alhamdulillah, she's battling, a surgery, and then here she is today, Alhamdulillah, with us. Welcome, Sister Lisa. Inshallah, you have full health. Ya Rab. Welcome. So we started the meeting just now and said like this is a higher objective for this meeting. And then today we were, Alhamdulillah, again, thanks to Sister Lisa, who has, connected with Professor Dr. Asad Zaman, and through the Ghazali project and other connections and other cooperation. So that we select, let's look at one of Professor Asad Zaman's seminal work. And then this was highlighted, actually, I think it was even recommended by the professor himself, that this is a good starting point. And I think it is a really brilliant place to start. It is basically a critique of the foundations of conventional economics. And by conventional economics, if we want to be more precise, we say it is the neoclassical microeconomic theory. So like Adam Smith recorded that called the classical economic theory. Then neoclassical is what developed, especially with the use of marginal of utility theory and building all these other elements into economic theory, which is now considered to be the dominant school of economics in the East or in the West. And to a certain degree, this is exactly what we also teach in Islamic universities. And actually, most recently, with my dear brother Ildus, when I delivered a class on Islamic economics, we did not critique, I think, microeconomics and the foundation of macroeconomics the way probably we will after reading this paper. So one of the things about why are we doing this? Why are we going over this paper? One objective here is that most of us come from an economic background here. We studied economics, but that means we may not see eye to eye on issues. So it is good to kind of go over the basics and say, well, where do we agree and where we disagree? And this is a great way to present or to go over Dr. Asad Zaman's lecture, paper, which is like a literature review, because it really summarizes all the basic issues and provide a critique for all of them. So that is a very good way for us to kind of to kickstart our discussion of this of this issue. So then right now it is 8:17. Let's, we will have Dr. Omercic presenting for about 15 to 20 minutes. Then inshallah, I'll try to present my comments and conclusion, and also about بعونه تعالى 15 minutes. And then we will have a really open discussion afterward بعونه تعالى, and really just we'll have a great time inshallah. I look forward to learn a lot. Dear brother Omar, you have the ability to share screen if you would like to. So go ahead and start inshallah. تفضل.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Zaid, for this opportunity to share some of my insights after reading this paper. If I knew I would be talking 15 minutes immediately, I would have maybe prepared some presentations, so I would make it more systematic, but perhaps this can be done next time. But I like also these casual commencements, of engagement with everyone. So assalamu alaikum also to everybody else.
Okay.
And I'll start by referring to basically the paper table of contents. I find it interesting, and as Dr. Zaid was mentioning, this is kind of a literature review, a summary that in brief try to review what what some other writings have been doing in addressing some of the inherent inconsistencies of basically the dominant neoclassical economics. And in certain instances, he has emphasized what is the difference of the heterodox economics view in relation to the neoclassical, or what we would also say the orthodox view. So the orthodox view, or what Asad Zaman has criticized, is basically what even Islamic economics is kind of trying to address and be an alternative to. So he started, like any discourse in economics, even in Islamic economics, it starts with the nature of basically man. And the essential thing from which microeconomics courses always start with is that man is usually a rational animal, which is true, but that rational does not refer only to the mind. So neoclassical economics was based on this kind of assumption that man is rational and that he always tries to maximize utility or maximize benefits from all his actions. And they develop beautiful mathematical models and calculations of equalizing the utility functions based on certain constraints and budget. So much of the works that Asad has presented here from section 1 to section 8 and a conclusion in 9 basically covers how all of the postulates of neoclassical economics are basically contradictory or basically falsified. So when I look at the diverse human motives, for instance, human motives are involving also resentment, sometimes in decision-making in choices. So even revenge or gratitude and carelessness, but also altruism. So when we speak about rational, sometimes to maximize some utility from certain economic actions, from businesses, does not involve only rationality, but sometimes, as we would maybe agree, revenge is something that's not rational. Revenge is some kind of aggression or hatred or a negative, developed feeling that leads to actions that contradict reason. And then altruism is also something that contradicts reason. So Asad Zaman has provided facts which all of you have read that indicates that people basically by nature want to be good and they want to be cooperative rather than revengeful maybe, and sometimes resenting, or just simply rational to maximize their own benefits and self-interest. Even social norms. When we look at the section of social norms actually lead often people to cooperate rather than just purely compete. And then when we look at the concept of free riding in microeconomics and many of the theories, usually everyone would love to deprive these free riders to benefit from public goods, but it is basically not true that some people who are not giving effort will simply just free ride on all the time, because sometimes we have to allow this kind of free riding and benefiting from public goods, because while we are sometimes maybe healthy, I'm just extending a little bit also of personal comments besides what not Atas, but as Asad Zaman was writing. So people in general, you know, will sometimes be sick and not be able to perform in the best manner. As we know, one of our members in the group has had, you know, like issues, and maybe even some others are exhausted from some work, and then others take over. So it doesn't mean that later on when someone watches this video is a free rider. We watch also many videos and we basically free ride watching and benefiting from them, but we can't be at the moment there. So that's why even in economics, when we produce certain public goods, like we know, I believe when Asad is referring to public goods, he definitely has in mind the waqf of the Islamic civilization. And he would say that many people benefited and did great things while benefiting from waqf, even though they did not produce waqf. And that's kind of a social capital. So he refers also the significance of social capital in reality of economic, socioeconomic life, moral values versus cheating. Basically, people are not really prone to cheating as much as maybe sometimes neoclassical theory would imply. And equally so, neoclassical theory fails to maybe analyze aspects of what Asad has written in his paper with reference to respective literature, fails to kind of comprise the models that it develops and based on which it tries to explain reality. They are not comprising and encompassing these kind of particular aspects of human nature being quite cooperative. And everybody knows that usually greater cooperation will lead to better outcomes and greater availability of information. And in some parts of his paper, he was referring to the principal agent model, where he was referring that sometimes even the contracts that the principal agent model theory is offering to different agents, different businesses, is not actually achieving much when just giving a monetary incentive, but there needs to be an element of trust. It's not even sometimes, if I remember properly, about giving someone certain responsibilities and recognition or support, financial support based on merit, but sometimes it's also about giving those who have not yet achieved or maybe shown some achievements, giving them an opportunity so that they perform. It's about trust. And then he shows and explains how trust has become something in the recent, since the 21st century started, has been something becoming more significant in economics, even in the stock market. He says it's very hard to predict it and accurately know what will be the movement of the stock market. But he says that once people and governments say, for instance, that certain bonds will promise certain returns, people or investors are not willing to sell those bonds. In fact, they demand more. And then he shows that the element of trust in an economy provided by the government is basically leading to better performance in the economy, which is opposite to the, let's say, axiom of rationality, or basically utility maximization, that you just look into how you can maximize utility. No, it's not just about utility maximization, but it's about looking whether you can trust certain bonds, for instance, or stocks, or even monetary policy, and then determine what will be your choice. And then to move a bit quicker over this outline and then go to my particular comments. It's an overall very objective review of literature and indicating how much of the assumptions and postulates, actually postulates of smart people, intelligent economists, have been proven wrong in relation to reality. And these postulates are based simply on certain assumptions derived from rational thinking. And then the question that actually arises for me personally is, if this is just based on rational thinking, how could, and I believe even Asad has been writing in many of his later writings, and that led him also to kind of make statements to reject the complete body of knowledge and start from scratch to develop Islamic economics, to basically reject the whole body of knowledge of neoclassical economics and Western economics, and then develop from scratch a new economics, which is Islamic economics. And most of the Islamic economists don't agree with that. Maybe he seems to be one of the few, if not the only one, who simply says it in that way. And I believe personally, through my ijtihad and reasoning, that would lead inherently to a lot of issues and problems to many Muslim countries if they would simply just reject. It needs to be rather a gradual process and a process of integration of knowledge. And oriented towards attaining the maqasid. Even the whole maqasid theory derived from Sharia and Islamic sources of knowledge says that we should have basically a gradual approach to shifting from, let's say, transforming the current neoclassical economic practice and based on all the critiques towards a greater and more welfare-oriented and public focused economic system, which is the Islamic economic system. Or we can simply also avoid, as Dr. Zaid was saying, he prefers not to use Islamic economics. I don't mind if we use Islamic economics or we don't use Islamic economics, doesn't need to have Islamic. Even Tariq Ramadan, and I wrote a review essay published in Shajara, I was mentioning there that he also suggested that we basically don't label it with Islamic, because the moment you label something Islamic, if there is something wrong, they associate it with Islam. But then it's basically maybe the Muslim way of understanding economics. That's much better, because when we associate something with Muslims, then we know they are not perfect. They're just trying to follow Islam. And he has many other arguments. So for that sense, I may agree that we may not and should not call it economics. So we welcome and show that it's inclusive. In fact, it should be universally appealing. And we should have that sentiment of understanding non-Muslims maybe being averse towards joining something that has a label Islamic. They feel a little bit shy. So once we give them space to just join something economics, then the reasoning and content of the discourse will lead them to basically just say, why don't we call it Islamic economics? So Asad has basically stimulated in me this kind of thinking, and it really is a good reading, this paper to kind of stimulate some critical overview of what we study in our universities and what basically we should study. And I sometimes, when courses on microeconomics or macroeconomics are taught, they don't involve discourse, let's say, on rationality, and then to say a bit more critically review aspects of rationality to say, but this theory is wrong. I didn't hear a professor saying when he teaches microeconomics, when he covers some section, to say, but just to tell your students this theory is wrong. There are so many alternatives, so the students are aware, at least they should be aware that that's kind of wrong. And while Asad was writing about and reviewing and showing how there are so many opposite perspectives of neoclassical economics in relation to reality, like labor, some, let's say, human beings are not commodities, and it has been proven through many empirical studies that human beings don't like to be treated like commodities, and they have sentiments. They don't like, for instance, he mentioned in a section, they don't love when you reduce the wages based on the supply demand, or sometimes a necessity to reduce wages in order to attain an equilibrium in the labor market. He says that basically people are averse towards reductions, and when you reduce the wage, the salary of some people, of the labor, they will be even less productive. But in fact, if you, in Keynesian economics came, and he said we should have involvement of government, and that is pro-Islamic economics, in fact, Keynesian policies. It's pro-Islamic economics. Even Islam is advocating the role or the institution of Hisba in that sense in markets to kind of regulate. So these are regulators. Governments are regulators, but at the same time, economic actors. And then at the end, this last and interesting section is happiness and welfare. This is where I kind of always, I kind of think about it recently in the last year. And I really say that, yeah, true, what is happiness? We can see basically what even this section covers. We can see that even Assad has that thinking, and he used to be in the West, and he saw that so many people have, let's say, accumulated a lot of wealth. They maximize their profits and still keep maximizing, yet somewhere you hear, somewhere in some headline, someone committed suicide because they had 10 million and they lost 1 million and they felt just bad. And so he's saying, and many studies are arising, and I believe even more since this paper has been written. I think it was not published anywhere in some journal yet, since it doesn't indicate. It's just from his ResearchGate it basically indicates that happiness is not necessarily money. There are many other factors that impact happiness of a person. And bounded wisdom, for instance, the last point, 8.4, bounded wisdom indicates that basically people sometimes, due to certain wise reasons, do not choose the best, what would rationally be the best choice, but they kind of overlook it and they say we should perhaps choose something that is more universally appealing and that will not provoke maybe greater social unrest. So my comments that I have, and some maybe questions, I have sent it through Google Forms. Utility maximization as a concept is basically, if you ask me, a great conceptualized and operationalized mathematical operation when we look into the mathematics of it. And it can serve as an estimation. I don't say that we should simply just reject it as a whole and never refer to it, because much great work has been done in relation, at least if provoked, if provoked by utility maximization. And it can basically just be a kind of show us an estimate of what the model is saying or what the calculations are saying, and then we can refer to reality and see whether it is important. So it's not a benchmark for decision making, but just a reference based on which we can just estimate maybe some and make some better decisions. So we need to include some alternative views, maybe from other economic theories, from the heterodox family of theories in economics. And then I'm not sure if I have how much more time I have, because there are quite some comments and questions.
Go ahead. How about another 3 minutes, inshallah?
Okay. Then I will skip some of the detail. They will be available for everyone to read later on once provided in the document. Even sometimes when I look at are demand and supply still important tools to determine equilibrium in reality, based on what Assad was writing in his paper, basically saying that the law of supply and demand have been proven false because there were frequently instances where it didn't simply reflect such circumstance. But does it still make sense? That's my question. I believe it does make sense. It's a good and necessary, actually, element and very logical, but then we shall not follow it literally. And we should know that we are dealing with dynamic and very complex creatures, human beings. So shall we abandon those, simply reject it, as maybe even Asad was saying in his general thought, or shall we just use it? And does Islam actually promote, maybe in the Muqaddimah, Ibn Khaldun, does he actually also speak about the law of demand and supply? So in that case, we should reject him as well. This is just a critical review of basically seeing this from a positive perspective. Then can the Islamic economic paradigm develop based on its own foundations without the use of concepts or benefit from research in utility maximization? So, and demand and supply dynamics in microeconomics and macroeconomic theory. Can we really develop, does Islamic economics have a microeconomics or macroeconomics? Do they offer just something just very new, something derived from somewhere that nobody was ever able to grasp with the mind? Or shall we just make use of it, integrate the beneficial contributions and those that make sense, like the contributions of Asad Zaman, from this work and other works? And maybe I can also go and skip some of the questions I have here. Can Muslims around the world in different institutions be perceived as someone who trusts other Muslims? Let's look at the trust. How much do Muslims trust Muslims? And are they fair in wage contracting to job seekers, or they rather reflect a utility maximization reasoning an impact upon themselves in estimating whether hiring someone will lead them to greater utility and maximization of maybe profits, or they hire someone who already has a job and is simply just free because of, based on no merits, simply because of maybe personally knowing the person. Does this happen, and is it impacted by the maybe utility maximization reasoning? These are questions that arose in my mind. And sometimes, why do Muslims who are in the West seek happiness in the East once they situated themselves in the West based on maybe utility maximization? Because I noticed many who basically go to the West and then they seek happiness in the East because they are not happy in the West, yet they don't want to abandon it and go to the East and then try to do some work there. So something like this. And yeah, I believe I'll stop here. I skipped the 3 minutes, and we'll discuss further later on. Maybe I'll raise a few more questions. So thank you very much. And I appreciate the opportunity to share this humble contribution.
Jazakumullah al khair, mashallah. This is really, really wonderful. And I just want to I know Sister Lisa is the manager of this group, so she is our Amira. So if you can feel you can talk, I will give the control of the meeting back to you. But I just don't want to overburden you or put any hardship on you. So just tell me, or inshallah, or make a sign language or something like that. Inshallah, you're doing great.
Okay, I think I have to limit my conversation. Sorry.
Inshallah, just so you feel better soon, Ya Rabbil Alameen, inshallah. Okay. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, I really thank you. I would like to really thank Akhi Omar for this very thorough, and I know there are many other comments that I'm sure that you would like to share. So, and now it's my turn. Let's see if but what you did is great, because you helped cover so many of the points that are like lingering in my mind, and that would help me kind of to jump from where you started. And then please let me know if you can see my screen, because if you're seeing the chat, or are you seeing?
Yeah, we can see it.
All right, so
I can see it. I hope others
you should be able to see paper review conclusions. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, we see.
All right, type. So this is, of course, if you like and you have time, this is like page number 10 of my review, but we can start from the beginning. But just because Eldus is keeping time and today, so inshallah I cannot do that. So, but you can have access to it. Most of the rest of the paper, what I did is that I copy some various stuff that stood out for me, and what I try to do is like put notes. So this note is my kind of points or commentary on different parts of the paper. So, however, I want to focus my time on the paper, my conclusions on the paper. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, yeah, this is a great consolidation of all the solid critique of conventional neoclassical theory in microeconomics and its foundational premises. To a certain degree, this is not totally new to me, because the PhD program I attended at the University of Utah was a heterodox program. So where there was a very heavy critique. So University of Utah Economics Department had heavy influence from a Marxist economist. And I did not know that at the beginning until I joined. I actually started the program, but that training with these Marxist economists was eye-opening, because they're basically very interested in critiquing the mainstream economic theory. And if actually, when you start looking and reading Marx, you see that the bulk of his work, Des Capital, is basically a systematic analysis and deconstruction of the claims of the neoclassical economics and its promises and its and its impact on humanity. So it was really amazing for me to see that, and Marx kind of differentiate between the classical economists like Adam Smith and Ricardo. He has actually respect and for these early economists, and then the ones that founded classical economics, and the later ones from Jeremy Bentham onward to Marshall, to this, to that. Marshall, of course, after Marx, but so there's this differentiation. So when I was reading this, it was definitely brought back all that discussion that I've learned a long time ago. And then there is this heavy reliance on the work of Thaler, father of behavioral economics and the nudge theory, this is good. I mean, this is a cutting edge approach to economic thinking, and perhaps we in this group, we would like to take a closer look to one of Thaler's work, and the nudge theory that he advocates. Of course, I think he became then a Nobel laureate, but he's also comes from a libertarian approaches. So definitely we have issues where we differ with them. The paper is talking to the general economic profession, but it is also easy reading with simple logical exercises that are great examples of economic reasoning tools. So anybody I really hope that anybody who reads this paper would carefully try to make sure that they understand the simple example that he uses, that uses logical thinking, because I mean, this is really very, very elementary, but nevertheless, the examples used are very good to convey an idea or a message. So now we're talking about neoclassical theory hegemony. And if this is not clear to everybody here, it bears to emphasize is that in almost every other social science, when you study that social science, you are exposed to a big range of ideas, a big range of theories. Political science, you have a whole range of theories. Psychology, there's a whole range of theories. Almost every other science, except when you come to economics. And 95% of the programs that teach economics, there is one point of view being presented, which is the neoclassical theory in microeconomics and the neoclassical theory in macroeconomics. It's just there's not much debate, and the only variation that we introduce and I taught economics and microeconomics and macroeconomics for years, and probably many of you have done so, is the only thing that the only space of freedom that we allow is talking about Keynesian economic, which is like a generalization. Beyond, but Keynesian economics is generalization of the neoclassical theory. So I mean, he still believes in the basics, and then he probably can call him introduces behavioral thinking as well from that early time. And as Omar said, Omercic says that, you know, that he brings this policy fine tuning, which raises very, very interesting question. I was like itching to kind of to jump when you were talking about that. Maybe I'll find the time to add a sentence or two about the interesting dilemma for Muslims when it comes to that discussion, which is actually maybe the second one here. So the section on money theory. Okay, so just one other comment about the hegemony, just to give you an idea. In America, we had these famous so-called Koch brothers. You know, Koch brothers, that's two billionaires who are brothers, and they're libertarian, they're, you know, and one of the things that they were doing is that they were going around to economic departments around the country in the US, and they would fund it with big amounts of money. And look, for an economic department, if you give them $5 million, that's a huge thing for an economic department. But then they will put a condition that you are going to teach a very strong neoclassical approach, free market approach to economics, and don't teach anything else, because that serves their, you know, their agenda, you know. So that just that there's a hegemony. You know, it's almost like this is a religion you cannot touch. This we believe. So I understand when throughout the paper sometimes it's mentioned, like, you know, it's so hard to break through because there's just so much writing on this. So the section on money theory is, in my opinion, where I had most critiques back to it. What is money? And how money is used and where value comes from. This is both, you know, it's a very near and dear topic to me, because this is my specialization. It's money and monetary theory and monetary policy. I think that, you know, there are some issues there, and then there is, but then it talks about what is our theory of money, which is again another area of research for us as economists, and is like, do we have a theory of money? Do we need a theory of money? So on and so forth. But within this, if you're talking money, and this money is closely linked to monetary theory. So, and this is where I find maybe a way to plug in my thought on Keynesian. So almost every central bank in the world follow Keynesian or new Keynesian or new Keynesian policies. Even Bernanke was the, you know, head of the Central Reserve Bank, who started as he's a monetarist, and then but when he became central banker, he was very much a new classical Keynesian, new Keynesian. So it is hard when you are in charge of this huge machinery that can influence money and inflation and employment. It's hard not to tinker with it. That raises two issues. On one side, you know, it is haqq, and it is this money, and you are affecting purchasing power, and is there dhulm happens because when you're playing around with the purchasing power of money. However, on the other side of this, and is, what about the tried and tested ability of monetary theory to ease economic crises? You know, by pumping more money, by quantitative easing, by this or that. If you actually can help the populace, help the disadvantaged, you know, it's basically, imagine if I sometimes relabeling things, it's either an imposed taxation on those who hold money or hold more money, and transfer that tax to the needy. If you want, this is an imposed sadaqah. If that makes people feel better in a Muslim country, this is an imposed sadaqah from the Khalifa, from the Wali al-Amr, to move money from through the inflationary policy or monetary expansionary policy, so on and so forth. So that would be very interesting question. That is this a matter now of competing maslaha, or do we or do we have actually very strong stand against manipulating money supply? And in that case, we become very much close to the monetarist school and Thomas Friedman, and that sometimes surprises some Muslims. Look, so you're really very close to that kind of thinking, and then we have to think back: is this really what we are trying to, what we think is the right thing to do from an Islamic point of view? Okay, so I want to move on to critically question the assumptions and the concept. That's one of the key things that comes out of this paper, is that to move forward is that we should really not be afraid from critically questioning what we have been taught. That is one of the very important things, despite what everybody said, that this is what everybody believes and so on and so forth. No. So what are these assumptions, and how do they make sense at an intuitively? Like, that's one thing that was like, intuitively, does this make sense? And then I call it also fitra. Let's not forget our fitra when we deal with these issues. Do we really treat each other this way, or this is just somebody is trying to influence how we? So what is our human fitra? And this is a huge issue, and I know Dr. Basma Abdul Ghaffar would like to start a whole project called the Humanity Project. So what is human being? ونفس وما سواها فألهمها فجورها وتقواها. We have this tendency towards fujur and taqwa, and what leads, what facilitates, what nudges us. What is the nudges that put us in this way or that way? Al-amru bil-ma'ruf and-nahy al-munkar. This is nudge. How can we nudge people using amr ma'ruf and nahy al-munkar, and translate amr ma'ruf and nahy al-munkar into institutions like waqf, institutions like zakah, institutions like takaful, so on and so forth. So this is really, really beautiful thing. And just when you said like revenge, as a human feeling, and then look, this is how the Quran Kareem deal with this. There is something true that's called revenge, but we also have Yawmuddin, where things are truly settled down. So this is how Muslims, deal with these. So again, there is nudge here theory. I do not need to take my revenge. And that's why when the people who mutilated the body of Hamza radiallahu anhu were not treated the same, even though after Prophet ﷺ swore by Allah to mutilate 100 of the non-believers, then he had to he went back on that oath, and he had he did kafara. So this is again how do they make sense from the maqasid paradigm revelation, and I'll talk more about this. So it's basic examining all the assumptions and concepts using an Islamic lens. Think outside the theoretical box and establish conventional wisdom and established conventional wisdom. And this is the important thing, is that everybody wants to think outside the box, but how do we think outside the box? Sometimes it's a big challenge, but I do believe that the maqasid methodology does help or helps a lot in breaking through the box and thinking outside it. What are the goals or consequences of ideas? So this is, whenever we read, just always see what is awaqib al-umur, what is aqibat al-umur, what will happen if we follow this kind of thought, what kind of society and community. And this is the beautiful thing, that throughout the paper, like, if you believe that humans are greedy or so self-interested in this way, what kind of society that happens? And here we say the journey and the destination question. Sometimes we are busy managing the journey and not the destination. Where are we going with this? So that's why again, maqasid-based thinking, that we really, really focus on the destination, so that so that the journey, so we are going in the right direction. But sometimes in Islamic economics or other field, like we are just in a reactive mode, trying to respond to conventional economics issues one by one problem by one problem. There is discrimination in the workplace. There is pollution. There is this. There is inflation. And we're just fighting small fires here and there, and we cannot think about where is this, where are we heading, and that means sometimes coming up with small solution here, but these solutions are not integrating with each other, not helping the community and the society and the world. It is very important to see how to test ideas, and well-designed tests. Watch for confounding factors. So like test ideas. If we think that this is going to promote Amr bil Ma'ruf, how, why, can you try to test that on some group, on some village, in some section of the city, on a building? Find experimentation. This is very, very important element of ijtihad, to find if we are correct, or ijtihad to find if we are wrong. And then watch for confounding factors as we design tests. And this is something like, in banking, I've done many times, is I would say, like, I'm trying to test consumer behavior and reaction to a marketing campaign. But sometimes, because at the same time I am sending a promotion for a saving deposit, another group in the bank might be sending another promotion for credit cards and has very high, reward system or something like that. So people are not opening saving accounts because they just want to spend more money. All right. So sometimes confounding effect, or the same product has multiple features. So confounding effect is just to think what else might be happening during the test that can confuse the learning that comes from a test. Anticipate and manage risks. Make sure that whatever we do not harm anybody. لا ضرر ولا ضرار. All right, so let's see. 5 minutes more, alhamdulillah. Real life solutions are transdisciplinary. This is one thing that comes from all this paper, that we really cannot just confine things to pure economic thinking. We're talking about psychology, we're talking about sociology, anthropology, all of these, and then science, hard science, so on and so forth. All of it does play a role. I mean, at least we need to be aware of this and understand human behavior. For example, human behavior can change, and so this is a huge thing for us. What is our theory of change as Muslims? How do you think people change? Do they change or they do not change? And if they do change, well, what are the models of human change throughout the stories of the prophets? Most of the prophets seem that were not able to change human behavior sufficiently, but some did. So when did it change? When did not change? So this is going to be really interesting, because if we did not crack this thing, then, oh, mashallah, exact stories of the prophet. There you go. Alhamdulillah. Allah yajzik khair, ya akhi. So this is wonderful area to learn more about. Interdependence among Allah's creations. That is something, and this is al-alameen. And then systems approach and institutional systems, that real life solutions tend to be made of multiple components and working with each other. وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى. Long-term gradual solutions. It's very, very important that humans change over long periods of time. So so we need that time and then the thinking in terms of full and perfect solution is not useful. It is usually one of the worst things we can do. Just think of an ideal situations, and that's sometimes just not achievable. And I see this is one of the major problems with what is called currently Islamic economics. We are thinking of an ideal human being that do not really exist or do not behave in this way, almost like angels society. That angel society did not exist during the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ and does not exist today. Guide, trust, and empower individuals and communities to make the right choices. We have to have some faith in humanity or our fellow Muslims. And if you distrust them, then they'll act accordingly. must acknowledge uncertainty and how this uncertainty is understood from a faith perspective. Can things go wrong? Yes, of course it can go wrong in our personal life, in everybody's life. Driving a car, doing anything. Can anything wrong with our kids at school, at home, in the most safest place? Yes, it can happen. And this is, but many people are paralyzed because of this uncertainty, especially if you do not have faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. At the end, we need to have tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is a very important motivational force for humanity to build and progress and take risks and know that, it is fi sabilillah. Here I touch on two things. I kind of really trying to be mischievous here with brother Eldus and brother Jasmine, because these are so mashallah experts on knowledge integration. So I try to kind of just be troublesome here, and it's like, is this your process? Because I was just trying to think how, okay, we will start thinking about solution, how the process to finding answers to all the problems and challenges that our dear Professor Asad Zaman raised. And then I tried to also talk about maqasid discovery process and still, but here I will say in maybe in a very quick couple of minutes, if I am allowed to, it is like, really, I like the paper's conclusion, and I think it has a lot in commonality with maqasid methodology, because talking about inductive method and deductive method, and that was really Al-Shatibi's work that in istiqra can bring us to high level of yaqeen and the knowledge that we are getting. So it's not only deductive knowledge, and deductive knowledge can have lots of flaws and gaps, and can be blinded. Establish niyyah. This is what in the process, humbly seek Allah's wisdom and guidance, blessing, strength, and recite Fatiha. Fatiha here is very important, because in a sense, Fatiha is the opening to everything, and that's why we recite it often in every single salah. Fatiha, it really wires the question and the objective properly, and orient ourselves as we start the cycle of the tadabbur of the Quran Kareem. You start with a question or an objective, and then you can see one thing I'm adding in every step here: revelation tadabbur cycle, which is reading the Quran Kareem. Understand the relevant theories, like what we're doing with the reading of this. And again, as you are reading the learning about mainstream economics, heterodox economics, Marxist economics, Polanyi approach, so on, so forth, we're always reading the Quran Kareem concurrently, and the questions and the issues and the and the struggle that we have, we always bring to Quran Kareem to discover what is the Quran tells us about these things. But here, this is a formal revelation tadabbur cycle. In this case, how does the Quran and Sunnah approach the relevant concept, objectives, questions, assumptions? Take the title, the name of this utility theory, money theory, this, try to search it from a Quranic point of view. Accumulate understanding of the maqasid methodology, 7 elements. What emerges from the tadabbur. So this is the emergent theory, like what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala open your hearts to, because that is a very important approach or dimension. Contemplate Islamic principles, axioms, and examine Islamic tradition on the matter. So this is, again, we have a massive history and scholarship with our Sheikh Imam Ghazali and others. We and Ibn Taymiyyah have massive contributions, Ibn Khaldun, so forth, so on and so forth. Let's not forget that. It will be, it's good if we are in touch with our tradition. And then you develop a maqasidi theory, either at discipline level or a good economic theory. A phenomenal level maqasidi theory, that is next level. If you think that's multidisciplinary or transdisciplinary, it's a more challenging. Think how it applies to objective or question at hand. How is the maqasid-based theory address, and what change it can do? Use deductive reasoning and inductive reasoning plus observation of ayat everywhere in the world. And this is kind of the conclusion of the paper of this paper. When it starts with Aristotle and this and that. So the connection here, we do use logic to connect things, mantiq or logic. We do read the Quran Kareem and try to use inductive knowledge. And also we are in touch with the world and the ayat of Allah. سنريهم آياتنا في الآفاق وفي أنفسهم حتى يعلموا أنه الحق. طيب, so this is so we connect our intuitive and fitra connects us with the world around us, with the animals, with the inanimate objects, the rocks, as the Quran Kareem asks us to observe the rocks and how they deal with water and how water affects them in Surah Al-Baqarah with Bani Israel and the animals. And this is all Allah's creation. This is all Al-Alameen. So that issue where we lose touch is solved in Islam because we're always asked to be in touch. Design a test case, learn from the test case, revise, theorize, and generalize, and then start again. And one way you can, I was trying to find a way to symbolize the process. So this is the famous minaret of Surah Marra'a that was built by the Abbasid Khalifa. So it's really, less than 1,000-year old. But what's beautiful about it, the cycles of tadabbur of Quran Kareem, it is similar to going around. Every time you go to a higher plane of understanding, of spirituality, of being in touch with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and every time you go up, you see more, you observe more. So that is the essence of the maqasid methodology, is that really, we're going to go in the cycles of tadabbur. Inshallah, always we seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's guidance. Let me stop here, and I'm thankful for your time. And inshallah, we will, we move on to general questions, discussions, anything you'd like to, inshallah, talk about. Jazakumullah khair. All right. I can stop the sharing if you want to. This is the paper. Yeah, keep it in focus.
Thank you very much for the wonderful, detailed, and critical discourse. It was really very comprehensive and inspiring.
All right. So I know others have provided comments. You think, Sister Lisa, if that's the case, I can try to bring it up.
Yes, I have put the Excel form in the share portal.
Okay, let me see.
Yes.
So what I can do, not this is not the one I want to go to. Let's say, and here we have the monthly. This is the monthly. And this is 2022. So, and then this is here.
Oh,
this other one. All right, mashallah. This is one. Mashallah, somebody, let me do this. So we have Lonnie, Sister Lonnie Hinders. Okay. Let me shift a little bit to the side. Yeah, and I'm missing Sister Lonnie. Hopefully, I hope she is doing well, inshallah. Okay, I will do this. Okay, I'll do this, and then I'll do this. Okay, now I can see everything. And I can even make it bigger so we can see it more clearly. Bye. So I will go over it and read it. Prof. Asad reminds us about the failure of utility maximization theory and how it contradicts to reality. Also, though economists clearly understand this failure, the theory still is used today. That's true. Perhaps Muslims should have their own utility maximization theory, which is different from conventional one. I suggest, how about exploring and examining utility for Muslim based on maqasid sharia? Perhaps we could formulate exact theory and formula of utility in Islamic economics. This is very, very important. comments. And I would like to hear your thoughts on it. I know just want to jump to the next comments. What are your thoughts on this? Do we need our own utility theory? Why do we? Can we think outside the box? Or no, this is essential, this is needed.
It's comment 3, right?
Yeah, this is, yeah. Say that again, Jasmine.
It is comment 3, the one that's highlighted, right? That's the one we refer to.
Yeah, this is Sister Lonnie's Lonnie Henry comment. Yeah, and this is, she was talking about basically, do we need maqasid-based utility maximization theory? So this is something I've thought about quite a bit. Basically, the one thing that when I say that there are two economic theories right now in the world, there is the neoclassical and there is Marxist theories. And sometimes when I say that, because one way I am defining theories is that because they have an idea or a theory where value comes from. So the importance of the utility theory of Jeremy Bentham, and this is like my Marxist professor made me actually read his book, yeah. So and I made a report on it. But like utility, there is utility because this is where value comes from. You know, why things have value? Because whatever people feel like, you know, they get benefit from it or they value it. Marx rejects this and say, this is not fair. This is arbitrary, this, that, you know, we need labor. We need value needs to be based on labor. So there's simple labor and there is complex labor, like the labor of economists, because really what we do is very complex, or doctors or engineers, and then the simple labor of, you know, shoemaker, of this or that, if you want to call that simple. But you know, so and there is a challenge when you try to move from simple to complex labor. I think anybody who is from an ex-communist country know that there is a huge challenge. How do you go from that theory, labor theory of value? So I said, well, if they all have labor theory of value, what about we as Muslims? Where's our value comes from? And then we say the closest thing we say, well, maslaha, is what benefits people. Now, what Marxist and neoclassical would say, like, well, ours is our objective. They are not subjective. Maslaha is subjective. Maslaha is basically a group of wise people perhaps going to sit together and say, there is maslaha in teaching, there's maslaha in having milk, or and this is the maslaha of milk, and maybe this is the price associated with milk. And I'm sorry, I'm talking to people who might be lactose intolerant, so that is all weird. Let's say maslaha in eating nasi, rice, and then this is what should be the price of nasi and Econ and all that stuff, and all right. So and then, but then that will be kind of committee decision. Versus labor theory of value says, well, just how much time it took the fishermen, how hard it was to catch this fish, and how much hard it was to raise this rice. Utility theory says, well, it just how much people like fish and to eat fish, and how much they like to eat rice, and how much money they can. So you see that they say, like, it is based on people behavior, or on just how much labor goes into it, not based on the subjective judgment of a group of people. Right? So that is where, like, it seems that from an Islam, so I was start thinking, what is the alternative to maslaha? And I was stuck until maqasid-based approach came. So, well, and thinking outside the box, why do we need to have our own value theory? Maybe we need to focus more on the objective that we want to achieve, and understanding understanding human behavior, and then based on that, we construct supply and demand. So this is just kind of my thought process about this. It's not final. I'm hoping maybe you have read something that you can contribute here on this subject.
Well, I personally look at it. I even questioned, maybe after my talk, there was one question I named where I was asking what is the Islamic response to it, and then another question that I just will read out now is, what is the alternative theory to utility maximization for us that will help us develop sustainably if this utility maximization is not the one, according to what the paper is, what Asad criticizes in the paper, of course, based on other literature, and can maqasid methodology ensure practical outcomes in economics?
Yes.
And if yes, why aren't the experts of maqasid and then economic methodologies in Islamic financial institutions doing anything to actualize it? So why don't we see, any proactive measures that are using a maqasid approach, maqasid al-Sharia approach in the Sharia bodies to basically certify Sharia compliant products, services in banks, in other different institutions or social finance institutions, to develop a theory like utility maximization from Islamic perspective, or from the maqasid, from maslaha, from akhlaq. Why aren't they doing anything? Because pure speculation in groups, in universities, will not lead to any alternative. It is the institutions that are in the industry that should basically, in collaboration with universities and intellectuals in institutes like Maqasid Institute or others, try to transform all those contributions into practical products and services, and then show how does Islam or the Islamic finance industry perceive value. How do they perceive value? How do they measure it? Like Asad, I always go to Attas, but then even Attas is very relevant here. Sayyid Muhammad Naqib al-Attas, when he speaks about justice, I guess the essential thing of what Attas was always speaking, and what his son, Sayyid Tawfiq al-Attas, was saying in a recent event last year, he was mentioning that his essential message and question was always about justice. We need to attain justice, or he was even conceptualizing it as the adab. So I believe a utility for Muslims, a great utility for Muslims, is always adab. If there is adab, I don't think that Muslims would ever have any issue, even with the Western conceptualized theory of utility maximization. But even they don't follow it.
Yes, so we need to be nudged to it, right? Okay, look, makarim al-akhlaq, that's the other way, that adab or makarim al-akhlaq, which is just, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. But then that will be very curious as to, okay, how do we, use that concept? And what does it mean? What does it mean to have, so makarim al-akhlaq at an individual level and at a group level, is this where we say that the sum is more than, the whole is more than the sum of the parts? Is that when we are act or conduct ourselves with makarim al-akhlaq with each other, how much more we can do? And so this can be interesting. So one exercise here is that we are in the modern life, we're trying to build all these institutions that replaces the family, replaces the qabila, the tribe, and so on and so forth. And usually we want a secular solution. We want the government to have a social security system, a retirement system, national healthcare system, so on and so forth, and become this something distant. There's But then it was just one idea was coming to my mind. Can we recreate the usba? And the usbat al-rajul, in the Islamic Sharia, the one who, for example, is also responsible for paying fidya, the blood money, if there is a wrongful death or a death happen by wrongful, so not intentional, let's say, in this situation, خطأ القتل الخطأ, that, then they come and help because 100 camel is a huge amount of wealth, but it is due to the dead person and his family, so we need to support. So here I was trying to think, well, what about a building, a residential building that can be, you guys are usba. If something happened to one of you, you all have to rally to help that person. Maybe a neighborhood, maybe based on in Islam, in the Islamic history, in the history of Muslims, we had guilds, or sometimes called futuwa, in a special Ottoman time. That is, al-usba, yes, and then al-mawali, that's right, mawali ar-rajul. And then, so all this can replace this. So let me just kind of quickly touch on. So one thing that I am hoping from this group is that you might be more in touch with what is being written in the field of Islamic economics. So have you seen anybody talk about value, where value comes from an Islamic point of view? Do you remember any such reading? And what does Dr. Asad Zaman talks about it?
Well, usually what I have actually written in my PhD thesis and even in some of the papers, but also refer to Dr. Hafaz Furqani's thesis about and even Mohammadi, I don't know his full name, Mohammadi, he was also a student in, I think, South Africa. He did a PhD on the futility of philosophical foundations of Western economics, something like that. And the questionable foundations, I think, of Western economics. So basically what he and what all three of us may kind of agree with is the philosophical foundations are where we derive our value, the axiology in particular of the philosophical foundations, because the philosophical foundations are composed of ontology, epistemology, axiology, and then even methodology. So axiology is basically the theory of value. And the theory of value in Islam is basically akhlaq. It comes from akhlaq. And then akhlaq is one of the few major branches of Islam when we look at it. So when we have, for instance, and that one from akhlaq is where we derive our worldview. We need to have that worldview. And what shapes that worldview? That worldview is also complemented by reason. And besides reason, the guidance comes from revelation. And this is where we maybe can insert also, let's say, the Maqasid methodology. And the Maqasid methodology itself is promoting the whole, basically the philosophical foundations of Islam. It's a comprehensive and dynamic method. So I perceive that few of these works, and I believe there are also other greater works, they always refer to axiology or akhlaq as the source of value, meaning adab, ethics.
No. So it will be interesting, Akhi Jasmin, either today or in a future topic, if you prepare something about, okay, how do we translate adab and akhlaq into something that you put value on everyday, as a factor in everyday transaction. How does that translate into that? I mean, conceptually, I'll try to see, like, what is this going to make me a better human being? I mean, if everything is in that relation, and it is in the term of how much better we are after consuming something, for example, I mean, that would be very, very intriguing to go into, like, what is the next step? Because one of the things is that there is tajdeed and islah. Tajdeed at the level of ideas, and islah at the level of actual day-to-day behavior. And so that will be interesting. And I just wanted to make a quick comment that we have Ammar Jafar on online, and he's putting lots of commentary And Brother Ammar is from Iraq as well. And he's actually a friend of Dr. Adib and a family. He's my cousin. And I know there's a lot of fans for Al-Ghazali here, and he is also a huge fan of Al-Ghazali and many of the Tasawwuf tradition. He has, is mashallah, alhamdulillah, has a very good established knowledge about, but he comes from an engineering background. And I think your brother Ibrahim know Ammar Jafar Doski, I think. All right. So just if I would, Brother Ibrahim, do you want to make a comment?
Okay, about the theory of utility maximization.
Yes.
I think the most important about this point is the theory of economic decisions. The theory of the utility is one of the significant factor that impact on the economic decisions. But there is other factors. I write a paper about the effect of Al-Sharia and the economic decisions. And I use the economic behavioral principles in explain how the Al-Sharia impact on the economic decisions. Utility is a significant factor, but it is not the only factor that impact on the economic decisions. I think we can put more than one theory about the economic decisions in Islam or in overall area. We need to put a comprehensive theory about economic decisions not exclude only on the utility. There is many factors like education, like faith, and other factors that can affect on the economic decisions. I explain these factors in my paper, but my paper it's in Arabic, not in English. I want to say that the important issue is the decisions, not the utility. We must to research about the economic decision, how we can affect the economic decision, the individual behavior in this area. This is the important point, and we must to look for about this point in our research.
This is beautiful, Akhi Ibrahim, because when you say decisions, then I can easily see relevance of adab in decisions, right? You know, if brother, I don't know if Jasmine is still around or he'll catch the.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh yeah, alhamdulillah, yeah. So because there's
Jimmy.
adab with nafs, there's adab with others, and there's adab with the community. That will be very interesting, and I like, again, this is an effort to think outside the box, and I love that.
I can relate to what Brother Ibrahim was saying. I asked actually one of the comments that I have given on the Google form, and it's there on the screen. Basically, I put there a question as a comment. Utility maximization teaches us to be generous due to unrealistic results of its modeling. So at least for me, this is what, and what I see even it teaches the West. So is utility maximization just an indicator of what mathematics implies, but the Western societies readjust its application in reality? And then another thing, here, the question above, interestingly, or the comment, interestingly, a mixture of comments and the question was, interestingly, the purpose of utility maximization was to increase self-benefits, basically benefits or profit, maximize profit, without regard to society or the reality. As we have seen, the critiques have always falsified it. But much of the Western societies are still the best in the world in material sense and education or even ethics and so on. And we have many scholars who traveled to the West and saw Islam as a system, and it's very organized. As far as Nalaf is concerned, it's cleaner. But then when they go to Muslim countries, they see Muslims but no Islam. So this relates to what Brother Ibrahim was also saying. At least for me, it makes a nice connecting point whereby we see that they have developed the theory of utility maximization and maybe even got some Nobel prizes. Some economists got Nobel prizes for that. But then they have just opposed the application of the results that it indicated based on mathematical models. And then produce some other things that in reality, based on other experiments, opposes the theory of utility maximization. But then I believe many of them will say, who cares about the theory when our lifestyle is better? So, and that is what is important. The outcome is important, but then the process, of course, sometimes may have all many hills and maybe valleys and even some lakes, but the outcome is very important, which does not mean the end justifies the mean. It does not mean that. We Muslims, we also think about the mean. So I guess the mean is important and not just the outcome. Yet the outcome is also sometimes the maqasid, the objective in the distance, is very significant because that's the vision. So sometimes if the vision, attaining the vision requires us to maybe permit some prohibited elements, then it's still, in my view, permissible because it eases the general circumstances of maybe the whole economy, society, or as you mentioned, should we use monetary theory in a government, in a country, or should we just stop using it because it has elements of riba? It's determined based on interest. So
you're right.
Yeah, these are critical questions. Or should we simply shift to an interest-free system and then lead to hyperinflation over some longer time, like what we see happening in Turkey? Is that really something that we will agree with? And there were comments of Dr. Almil Cholan. He's the director of the, I think, Islamic Finance Center in Australia. He's a Bosnian. And he was giving short videos about Turkey, indicating there were critiques of its monetary policy actions, but then there were no emphasis on how much Turkey has been growing, the economic growth indicators. And even I think the minimum salaries have been raised to many people from for maybe about 2,000 lira, if I'm not mistaken. But then still in reality, we see a lot of hardships that people are experiencing in Turkey. So is that really something that Islam is promoting, is willing to happen? Is that something that maqasid theory is going to justify? How about if that happens in all Muslim countries? Will that lead to general poverty and maybe even revolutions that we have not seen before?
Yeah. And that's a beautiful commentary, Akhi Jasmin, and I'm resisting jumping into more conversation because I will also want to give justice to the comment.
I want to add something, Mr. Zaid, if please.
تفضل عمر, تفضل.
Thank you very much. Actually, all the speak was talking about economy and the integration of economy with Islamic thoughts and maqasid al-Islam. From my point of view, I think the scale is very good for this subject. As you mentioned in the Malwiya, in Surah Marra'a minaret, we can also integrate the scale of mapping. For example, from a scale 1 to 100, we can see detailed, for example, house. Another scale, 1 million scale, we can see another generality. In generalization, this is the subject of generalization is also general in all the thoughts. Also, the ethics is the main pillar that Islam has make the foundation on it for the subject of economy. Because if you read the Quran, we face many surahs and ayat that are talking about ethics with the integration of daily work. For example, al-Jum'ah. وإذا قضيت الصلاة فانتشروا في الأرض. Another thing, al-Ma'un, the tools of the house. We can borrow it from our friends without any. Also, al-Mutaffifun. Those surahs can lead us to a very good base that we can make our thoughts integrated with the subject. This is the main point. Another point, we didn't read many thoughts and philosopher writings. For example, in Samarkand and Bukhara, we have philosophers that integrated philosophy with usul al-fiqh. Burhan al-Din al-Nasafi, one of the main people that has made those subjects in a proper way for the students, and he helped the students in fiqh al-Hanafiya or fiqh al-Hanafi. But the main issue in those theories and subjects that has been made in a logical form to understand it and to use it, because logic is a tool, is a scientific tool, or we can use it as much as we use it, or we need you to use it. Logic cannot give us even the philosophy if the categories of the logic is a basic or the door for the philosophy. We can use logic as much as we understand logic and use it in easily. But the main issue that right now we face it in the al-maqasid, we can see easily, that logic is very complex, while it is always should be very simple. In a few papers, a few pages, we can understand logic and can use it in everything. For example, in maqasid, or even in the ilm al-kalam, or anything else. Those main points. Another point also, we should reread books like Ikhwan al-Safa wa Khillan al-Wafa, 4 volumes. Also Al-Farabi. Also, we can read Ibn Sina. As you know, right now, Ilm al-Ilahiyat, or the science of Ilahiyat, we have Al-Quran al-Karim. We don't need anything else but Quran for understanding Ilm al-Kalam and the Asma Allah al-Husna wa Sifatih al-Ulya. For that, the nature and the mathematics and many other things like logic inside al-Shifa or even al-Razi, it will be a very good integration, because it was in that way in the beginning of establishing Ilm al-Maqasid. All the people, even Ibn Taymiyyah, has read logic. But right now, our issue that is the major minds, if you can talk as this way, the major minds cannot use the logic, because it has been studied as a study or theoretical, not like a tool. And thank you very much for and my salam also to my brother Ibrahim and all the attendees.
Allah yajzi khair, Allah yajzi khair. I just want to highlight what you've said here, that the science or ilm التصوف has I mean, it basically is dealing with the human soul, its shortcomings, and how to guide it towards a better state, how to nudge it. So it will be very interesting if we can also visit that again. And I was as I was reading the paper, one idea came to me, that perhaps we can have a conversation with Professor Bagus Riono, who is alhamdulillah, the head of Islamic psychologists, Union of Muslim Psychologists, or Islamic Psychology, and with specifically with like human behavior in economic field. And so just like to anchor it a little bit, and what are his thoughts of influencing human behavior to do good. Let me quickly, I really would like to give justice to the comments here, and this is Sister Lisa's commentary here. I was a student in universities, both Islamic and non-Islamic, and use Eurocentric textbook, especially in economic textbook. Agree with the evidence provided in the paper, observed contradictions and several basic assumptions. As a Muslim, I think utility maximization is kind of following the nafs, self-interest, which ideally shall not be overemphasized. Altruism of human being is among the things that I identified as embedded characteristic, which can be a clear evidence that against the utility maximization. In developing alternatives to existing economic system, I observed different approaches and styles. I think it is possible and that allow us, as long as heading to Islamic worldview, different context, background, considerations leads to different approach. Metaphysics elements need to be reconsidered. It's a challenging to measure these elements. We have to work together and be wise in using our limited time. That is definitely true. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ, right? We always have that conscious about it. So one thing here, so this is excellent commentary here, and especially talking about is this utility maximization is just nafs and self-interest, obviously, because there is no higher reference here. There is just hedonism, like he said, like, just how much more you can, the more you can consume, the better. And that is a very basic way. So one thing that was, so when you talk about self-interest, I mean, I had that struggle with the commentary, because sometimes, the utility theory talks about self-interest. It doesn't talk about greed. And I wanted to make a big deal out of this when I was reading this paper of Dr. Asad. Like, oh, you're just using very inflammatory words. You're saying greed. It is really just self-interest, and we all have self-interest. That is the self, are every single human self-interested. And when we hear about it, first thing was like, it shocks us, well, no, we have altruism. But then if you go to a philosophy class, then tell you, well, altruism is another form of self-interest. I want to do good to the poor because it helps me in the hereafter, or it gives me hasanat, and I feel good about myself. So everything is self-interest. This is where breaking outside the box is very important, because somebody made me play a game, came up with a term called self-interest. And he said, well, everything is, is for your own benefit. And as if now this is wrong. So why you created a world and you put me in it and made me think that suddenly altruism is same thing as stealing or something like that. And because they're both self-interest, I'm doing something for the purpose of my self-interest. And I said, well, I refuse maybe to accept this. I believe that there are, good deeds and there's bad deeds. And then and there's adab that differentiate between the two and inform our decisions. So just really, because my first impulse was that we just can augment the utility theory to accept non-material or non-materialistic returns. So like, I can add it feeling good because I'm doing good to my family or to my neighbor. But then to a certain degree, this might happen. Mainstream economics don't want to do that because it complicates the math. And here we are as Muslims coming and dealing with this, like, just we don't need to accept. We don't need to accept to be put in that box. Like from this conversation today, maybe we can go through a decision theory that leads to using adab as a critical factor, as makarim al-akhlaq, as a khuluq azim, as key factors. And this khuluq azim leads to a community and a society, a virtuous society, and produce hayat tayyiba. Wallahu alam. So, if there's any commentary on it, of course, we'd love to hear.
Yeah, I would have just something to say. Actually, when you have presented after me your comments, and you were mentioning about thinking out of the box or out of the neoclassical theoretizations, and even now we need to think out of the box. But I'm afraid that usually Muslims go from, let's say, one box to another box, and they are stuck there.
Right.
And then when they start speaking about maqasid and about Islamic economics or Islamic this and that, they simply go deeper into the box and they can't jump anymore. It's like they're inside a well,
Yes.
and they need a ladder to climb out.
Always
So
deeper.
to the extent that even Asad says reject the whole body of economics, and and this is something where people then start to say, well, most of the Islamic economists themselves studied in Western universities, so we should basically not recognize their degrees. If you don't recognize the bachelor's, their PhD is invalid.
That's right.
We have a huge problem then. Everybody is just gonna lose their job because yeah. So that is just what I'm afraid.
That's right.
Which again, forces us to say, hey, that's true. I'm in another box. So, but don't jump into a third box.
Oh, no, this is beautiful. I mean, this is like, it was like a challenge for me and Brother Eldus, because like, how are we going to teach economics again if we ever asked to? But Alhamdulillah. Wazir Bakhsh, who is our dear brother from Guyana, which is the only one country in all of South Africa that speaks English. So it's a tiny country. South America. Jazakallah khair. So it was just an amazing thing for me to learn that. So no doubt the accumulation of capital was based on colonialism. By this means, Europe were able to expand their ownership of capital. Econ, in his Capitalism and Slavery, pointed out clearly how African slavery in the Americas gave birth to Industrial Revolution in England. However, history and theories are not value-free. They reflect the worldview of authors. It is therefore important that victims of colonialism write their histories and develop theories from the perspective of the victims in order to create a just economic system that is good for all. The victims need not parrot the history and theories of the colonizer as their redeemer for economic prosperity, but liberate their thoughts by formulating their thought to upturn the dominant thinking, to bring the powerless as co-creators of a new world. So this is a very insightful comment, and basically, if you go through, I mean, I kind of encourage you to read Das Kapital of Marx. Put it on your 100 or 1,000 plus volume that you need to read. But basically, one of the major things that Marx does, he said, like, what is the origin of capital? Where is this wealth that happened in Europe? Where did it come from? So it shows that the exploitation of labor in England, and actually most of his study is about England, and how the bourgeoisie class came into ruling, and so on and so forth. And maybe, I don't know if people who lived in ex-communist or socialist countries may have been exposed to this. So this is part of it. how the slavery led to massive accumulation of wealth that the West enjoy now, and that welfare that they have right now, that makes it easier for them maybe not to be tempted, not to steal, not to this, to that, particularly because they provide so many social services, and then the rest of the world have been deprived of these social services. Even now, I live in America, where we are 5% of the population, of the world's population, but we consume about 20% of the world's resources. So this is very, very interesting. And again, that is maybe if there's one point here that from what is our own point of view, and I think there's a lot of good happening in the Muslim world. Just sometimes we do not reflect or we do not highlight. And that is, I really want to emphasize this, that sometimes we're just not even telling our story or the good things that happens. Like people are donating, people are establishing waqf, people are doing zakat and sadaqah. There's a lot of good happens. Are there exploitation? Are there lots of bribery, for example, in many, many Muslim countries? Yes, there is a huge problem with bribery, but then there is also good happening in these countries. Sometimes corruption in the West is in different forms. And that, that does not register for us. So just saying that sometimes this is part of the nudge theory, is that do not just focus on the wrong thing that happening in the Muslim country. Identify the good, and this is makarim al-akhlaq. Identify the good and build on it. To a certain extent, Dr. Ali Abdul Mun'im's approach, who is kind of, one of the people who influenced Dr. Bagus Riono out of Indonesia Islamic University, is Makarim al-Akhlaq. So he looked at the Indonesian context. He's originally Egyptian. He looked at the Indonesian concept, and he looked at the Pancasila, and then he also kind of tried to promote that with Makarim al-Akhlaq. So as a nudge theory, in a sense, how do we mobilize a country and to develop sustainably and holistically and in a better way, using what the people in that country believe that this is what they believe in. In Malaysia, and Dr. Zulkifli Abdul Razak, the rector of IIUM, talks about Sejahtera, the concept of Sejahtera, which, if I'm not mistaken, and Sister Saida can correct me, it is like, it's like something wholesome development. So here I'm trying to say, like, use our local history and values and tradition to promote good. إنما بعثت لأتمم مكارم الأخلاق. This is the statement of the Prophet ﷺ. So the adab and makarim al-akhlaq, I'm here to complement makarim al-akhlaq. And let's see if there are any comments on this. All right. So let's see. I'm trying to find whose comment is this.
Another thought that I have, it may be related as a comment, and it may be.
This is yours.
Just some. Yeah, that was mine.
Okay, good. We can skip it then. I was like, oh, this is the longest one. Sorry, Omar. Sorry, Jasmine. تفضل.
It's not all linked rationally with each other, but yeah, there are many questions. So I guess it's all some relate also to Waqf,
yes.
And then another point that I wish to say in relation to where does value come, let's say in the Muslim perception of utility maximization. In the very beginning, when of the rise of Islam, when Abu Bakr was radiallahu anhu, was giving all his property for the sake of Islam, and Umar al-Khattab was giving 50% of his property for Islam. That is where an example that Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman, rahimahullah, the previous rector of IIUM, International Islamic University, Malaysia, and even one of the major co-founders of IIIT, International Institute of Islamic Thought, has been basically many times communicating as one of the sources of value and belief and foundation of Muslim development, whereby they have put all their trust in the public good, in Waqf, instead of keeping things for themselves. having private property. So when the question came about whether one should accumulate private property or maybe work for the public good, these two first caliphs of Islam have given the first one 100% and the second one 50%, because they knew that if at that time they keep the properties for themselves, that the cause of Islam will not rise. And but giving it for the public good will also make them better off. So if they kept it for themselves, they knew that if the cause of Islam would have failed, they as Muslims would have lost all property and maybe would have been even killed. So for that reason, the value is derived from the community, as they say, or the jama'ah, rather than the individual. So yeah, that's a comment that I almost forgot to mention and say.
So, subhanallah, I always have Misk al-Khitam as Dr. Ildus. And here is his commentary, and I don't really usually find any better final word than dear brother Ildus. So this article by Professor Asad Zaman and co-author is
I can read it myself if you like.
Go ahead then, please. Tafadhal.
Well, I won't say anything new. I think you know, when people write something, when they write an article, and when other people start commenting, usually it is they may look at it with amazement. How come? I have never thought about that. No. I've never thought in those along those lines when I was writing. So basically, you know, there's so much has been said about this paper, but I just looked at the structure. The structure of the paper. What is the goal of that? Goal of this article is just to shed light on where economic theory acts as an, and I just quote him, where economic theory acts as an obstacle to understanding reality. So basically, just to show that the economic theory is based on the current assumptions, they are actually obstacles to reality, to understanding reality. And then many a time, naive observers or the non-specialists, so-called non-specialists, they have a better understanding of reality. And so the problem statement that the authors are analyzing, the problems that they are analyzing, is the dichotomy between theoretical rationality of economics and the rationality observed by other disciplines and other normal human beings, non-economists. And of course, methodology is just a survey of existing literature, and then the topics. So all of these topics, and then the conclusion. Yes, it's simply a restatement of the earlier propositions. That the modern economics assumptions and theories are unscientific and wrong in many areas. And so we can go on and on about the heterodox economics, and there are so many other many methodologies and ways and approaches to look at economics and the assumptions that are used. And so this is some assumptions and theories are unscientific, even though we can use you know, seemingly like the complex mathematics just to prove the point. Yeah. And of course, the authors, the main thing that I see in this article is that the authors call for radical methodological changes, and this is I think the main goal of this paper. And actually, many of our colleagues, I think here also, and our colleague Dr. Hafez Furqani and others of the same kind of stature, that we want to look at methodology, even though the economists, like professional economists, don't like looking at methodology, because they would say it doesn't make any sense really, because there are other immediate needs of that you can employ mathematics, you can employ modeling, you can do all of this stuff, interesting stuff that is really you can do a lot of things. But my personal observation is that it's a good paper with lots of information to refute the existing modern disciplinary economics. And so this position, of course, is not unique, and there are a lot of writings have been done. All the schools, heterodox schools of economics. And so, in my opinion, and at the end, in that paper, you can see that he calls for another Copernicus to work on to come out from this from the economics. But I think we don't need a Copernicus, but we need just a lot of sane people to refute the current status quo in terms of politics, economics, science, technology, history, so many other areas. So one of those approaches and areas is the what is that? The Eurocentric approach. And so the solution is not revolutionary, but in my opinion, it's more revolutionary, more evolutionary. And so I would just stop my comment right here. And I think that should be enough. And unfortunately, we have not heard our sisters here, and I think you should have asked them maybe to comment first. All of us have biases, and we have this bias of anchoring bias. And we just hear something and then we continue commenting on. We just anchor our own thinking later on, and we just continue going on in this with this anchoring. But it is good for us to also see some other opinions as well, especially from our female colleagues here.
Sister Saida, you're very much welcome to make some comments.
Yeah, actually, I haven't read anything about the paper, and then Dr. Jasmin, he recommended me to join, but mashallah, it was very enlightening discussion. If I know that it's going to be in very beneficial discussion like this, I would have read before the session. So inshallah, quite interesting about the value and also utilization, the utility maximization. Am I pronounced it right?
Right.
So yeah, I'm kind of very interested to discuss about the value and also how it relation to this Islamic spirituality, tasawwuf. So how akhlaq is defined as a tasawwuf, how tasawwuf is defined as akhlaq. So I think could be an integration while talking about this in the maqasid discussion. And then yeah, I'm looking forward maybe for the next month meeting. Who knows? Yeah.
Inshallah. Thank you.
Not much to say here, but that but I kind of prefer to listen more from you guys, and I can see that brother is it Dr. Amar or brother Amar? And then yeah, and he listed a few works of ethics, and then from classical school of ethics, and also if we can talk about that, it's going to be great, inshallah, in the future. And then I'm going to discuss which is something which is related to akhlaq, and also the something which is more related to the Islamic economy. It's not an economic theories in general. So because you don't want to talk about, you don't want to give this kind of nomenclature of Islamic, because it sounds misleading sometimes. So what do you guys prefer? Maybe we can talk about it in a rather good economics, as Brother Zaid mentioned before. Yeah, so
we're trying to find, personally, I'm trying to find kind of something else, we're still looking for something alternative, but just to put the word Islamic, it just sometimes it just overwhelms the topic. Just this knowledge belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I don't think like all Muslim scholars during an Abbasi and Umayyad time. So this is Islamic astronomy, and this is Islamic medicine, and there is just knowledge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah يجزيكم خير ما شاء الله. No, this is wonderful, and especially that emphasis you have on the akhlaq and understanding a human being. That's the basic thing that, inshallah, I think we have a group that is management for this discussion, monthly discussion. Inshallah, we'll hopefully get this feedback and think about what would be the next topic that we want to go into. One quick comment here is that we also kind of try to see, okay, the path to the solution, and what is the path to solving or to providing an alternative. And there is the integration of knowledge approach, there's Maqasid methodology approach, and of course there is the Dr. Asad Zaman's approach, which he is trying to promote, and that's the Ghazali project, or they have the Ulum al-Umran, and he is heavily influenced by al-Ghazali. I would like maybe from Sister Lisa, because she might be very kind of knowledgeable or have exposure to it. If you can, just like, to the best of your ability, I would love to hear also what is that kind of process looks like. And we have between Brother Jasmin and Ildus can also kind of, I mean, as we go through this meetings, we are looking at how to find solution and a methodology to find solution, and how this methodology can be obtained. So right now, so I can identify these three methodologies generally: the Maqasid methodology, the integration of knowledge, and perhaps Ulum al-Umran, or the Ghazali project of Asad Zaman. It will be interesting to see how they overlap, how they differ. And it will be very interesting if we see if we can apply it, if we can start thinking about addressing some of the questions that was raised in this meeting using these research approaches. This has really been wonderful. Alhamdulillah, we have a chat group where you can put voice messages, or you can continue this conversation, and we can keep this discussion going on there. This, mashallah, has been basically 2 hours by now. Alhamdulillah. I enjoyed it. Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much for being here. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.